so then we need a motion to accept the agenda.
Madam President, I move we accept the agenda with the amendment proposed by Manager Waller.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Be a roll call. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Before we go any further, it said there's somebody unknown on the line. We should put them into our attendance. Would somebody like to identify themselves?
Sorry, Matt Lingham with Kimley Horn.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Everybody else is on. Okay, approval of the minutes for July 22nd regular meeting.
Madam President, I move to, where the heck is it? Move to approve the minutes of the July 22nd, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Manager Wynant. Any further discussion? That will call for a vote. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Okay, the consent agenda. Patrick, anything to add to that?
Yeah, President Priner, staff does have one proposed change. This would be on page 27 of the packet for permit application 20-043. Within the stormwater section in the table for the West Underground Coltex system, we just wanted to provide a little clarity there. The location does currently say that it is the off-site access drive, and we would propose changing that to under access drive. It is still on the applicant's property, and we just wanted to make that clarification.
What page was that?
It's on page 27.
27.
Everybody have that, or should Patrick repeat it? Okay. Any other questions on the consent agenda today? It is a consent agenda, but if you'd like to pull out a permit, we can talk about it.
No.
Anybody? Okay, I'll need a motion.
President Priner?
Yes.
I'll just note, I think Matt from Kinley Horn is probably here for permit 20-60. Would that be correct? Matt?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? We'll need a motion.
Madam President, this is Manager Wagaman. I would move to approve to Caprock permit number 20-015, 20-043, 20-056, and 20-060.
In accordance with the district engineer's findings and recommendations stated August 5th.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
August 5th, 2020.
We have a motion and a second.
And that includes that change in there too?
It did, yep.
All right. Yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Will be a roll call. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Okay, we'll move on from that to
Next, our water quality grant program consent agenda.
You're correct. Is that Lauren? Well, does anybody have any questions on the grants?
I don't have any, Madam President, this is Manager Wagman. I don't have any questions, but I just had one comment on it whenever everybody's done with their questions.
President Priner, for clarity, for those that are in attendance, I'll note these are the ones on consent agenda, and we do have one for Fran Miron that does appear on the actions that follow this. So it's.
I'm sorry. I thought we were on that one.
Yep. Nope. It's just the.
It's two grants for Carol Moore and Tracy Jansen.
Well,
Okay.
Madam President, this is Manager Wynant. I would move approval of the water quality grants R20-05 and R20-06 as presented.
Madam President, Bradley here. I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the grants? If not, I'll call for a vote. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wayman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to that. Next thing is open mic. Is there anybody here that out there that like any public comment or open mic on anything that is not on our agenda? Anybody? With that, we'll move on to number 1. Consider water quality grant cost share. Mayor on application.
Thank you, President Priner, Board of Managers. The third item for your consideration today is Washington County Water Quality Grant Application that starts on page 72 in your packets. I'm presenting this project today as a separate action item for your consideration since it differs from our typical projects that come through the program in both the project type and the grant recommendation amount. I'm going to share my screen here for the presentation. Bear with me here. Okay, let me know if you have any trouble seeing these. I think this works here. Okay. So the proposed project is, I believe, the first agricultural project to come through the Water Quality Grant Program in several years. The proposed project is located in Hugo off of Homestead Avenue near CASA 8 and drains to Hardwood Creek, which is impaired for dissolved oxygen and fish bioassessments and has a TMDL. The project would construct a waste storage facility for dairy cattle off of an existing barn to temporarily store manure until it can be appropriately applied to farm fields. Here's a photo of the existing barn. And a diversion would also be installed to divert runoff from the existing or from the facility into an existing grass waterway, which will allow the runoff to filter before getting to Hardwood Creek. And then here is the diversion channel to the right here, and then the proposed storage facility. The project as proposed will have significant benefits to Hardwood Creek. The highest pollutant reduction numbers that I and the CAC have seen for a project through the Water Quality Grant Program. It is projected to reduce 29 pounds per year in total phosphorus, 84 pounds per year in nitrogen, and 337 pounds per year in biological oxygen demand. This project would help address the Hardwood Creek TMDL goals as livestock facilities are included as an implementation action in the TMDL. It is an expensive project, which is typical for this type of agricultural BMP, but additional funding sources are being pursued, including funds from the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program and Washington Conservation District. Staff feel that going above the usual 7,500 project cap is appropriate for this project due to the large scale of the project, the significant pollutant reduction benefits, the public outreach opportunity, and it's also in line with staff's current efforts to encourage projects in rural and agricultural areas in the district. The project was considered by the CAC last week at their meeting. CAC members supported the project and staff's proposed grant amount of $30,000 and recommended it as presented. The CAC also had a second recommendation. They recommended that the Board of Managers consider allocating additional funds beyond the proposed $30,000 towards the project due to the significant water quality benefits to Hardwood Creek. I and Angela with Washington Conservation District are available today for any questions on the project.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Any questions from the board? Any comments, Commissioner Miron?
I did have, Madam President, this is Manager Wagman. I just had one comment. It's not aimed at Mr. Miron at all, actually. I love the project. I think it's a great project. And this has nothing to do with Mr. Miron's project. I'm talking in a general sense on this type of project where we're actually doing something, a good project, but it's part of their business. And I do think we should be careful that they're not completely, I guess I would have trouble with a project like that if they're getting 100% funding or 90% funding, but that's obviously not the case with this one. I have no illusions that Mr. Miron's trying to make money or anything off of this. Just in a general sense, I think that on a project like that, I think it's kind of important that the applicant does put in the biggest percentage because it is affecting their business. And for that reason, I just, on a general sense, I think that, but not on this project. It's obvious that this is going to be expensive and he's not, I mean, he's not obviously doing this to get rich or something. He's doing it for the right reasons. So that was just a comment that for future thought. That's all.
Madam President, this is Bradley, Manager Bradley. I'm clearly going to support this. First of all, I think point out that it's changed a lot since my grandfather had a dairy farm. I remember as a kid, those ponds.
Yeah, me too.
and the honey wagons. So my only concern was that it's kind of reminds me of when first time we bought or helped buy a street sweeper, and I was thought, well, are we going to be finding ourselves? And then I realized the cost of this thing and the difference between the total cost and what's being funded. And I don't see this as going to be something that's going to break our back with a lot of requests. So that took care of that concern. But it is a lot of money, and I think it's a great project.
Okay. Comments?
Chair, this is Manager Wynett, and first of all, congratulations, Commissioner Miron, for getting the Ag Water Quality Certification Program. You all might recall that is the program I worked on prior to my retirement from the Department of Agriculture, and it's not an easy certification to get. So we're talking about field by field evaluation of farming practices, and happy to report that there are more and more ag producers that continue to get certified. So that's first. Secondly, as you can see by the numbers, this is a huge investment. So, and it's an investment that is made for water quality purposes. And I suspect, unless Washington County Soil and Water District has something else to say, it's also voluntary. So again, congratulations. Lauren, there was so much, will you remind us again that there's so much money allotted per county and that Washington County hasn't used all their funds? So that's where we're at on this. Both Pat and I were at the CAC meeting where there was more information given about this one, but the idea of funds available through this program earmarked for Washington County.
Correct. President Preiner, Manager Wynand, staff do allocate specific project funds for each county and try to allocate it in a fair way. And Washington County lately has not been spending all of its funds. There just hasn't been demand in recent time. And so there isn't any issue this year in taking away funds from other projects. I confirm with the Conservation District that we don't have any additional projects in mind for the rest of the year in Washington County.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, Madam President, this is Manager Waller. I'd point out, first of all, that the district has a long history in supporting these programs. This isn't the first time that they've done this for a dairy farmer. Second, I point out that the portion of the district that's in Washington County has several dairy farms, And then probably in the future, some others that will qualify not only for the state program that Manager Weinig's talking about, but also we'll need to put in updated manure handling facilities. And further, Washington County has probably more horses than it has cows these days. I don't know that we even have a dozen dairy farms left on the JD2 Hardwood Creek system. There's 4 that I can think of offhand that are still actively shipping milk. And so this is a very good improvement for that impaired water course. And I would look forward to working with Lauren later on this year on this survey, because we have so many horse places, and to develop a program that's particularly geared for them. This program that we're looking at works for dairy farms or for cattle, and we don't have a program necessarily for the horses yet. And so we have that area here, and I'm really very happy to support this today. Thank you.
Anybody else? We have a proposed motion on page 73.
Madam President, I would move to approve the water quality grant contract W20-02 up to $30,000, not to exceed 25% of eligible project expenses in accordance with the Rice Creek Watershed District staff's recommendation and established program guidelines.
Manager Wagaman, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, it'll be a roll call. Manager Waller.
Yes.
Manager Winan.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wagaman.
Yes.
And Manager Preiner, yes. Okay, very good.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
this is Fran Miron. I just want to thank the board for your service. This is the second project that we've had before the Rice Creek Watershed District in the period of time that I've been farming, and I've been on the home farm here since 1976. The farm was established back in 1887 by my great-grandfather, and my kids, 2 sons now that farm with us, represent the 5th generation on the farm, and their kids represent the 6th generation. So the project that we did and received funding through the watershed was done 23 years ago and is still in use. This project provides a second storage facility to accommodate the barn that was shown in the picture, but the other facility is still being used, and it really does allow us to follow a much more prudent nutrient management plan on the farm, adding organic matter and nutrients outside of commercial fertilizers that otherwise would be used. The water quality certification, I worked with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture on that. And this project was one of the things that was identified for us as improving water quality within the area. So, this is, I think, a step forward. Our 2 sons that farm with us, Paul has been with us for 15 years. Andrew has been with us for about 5 years now, since they both completed their post-secondary education. And this is really an investment, not so much for my wife and I, but for them and the future of the dairy operation. I do want to share with you that we do host open houses on a regular basis. Of course, with COVID, we haven't done anything this year. Last year, we had an open house that brought in about 2,000 urban visitors to the farm. And certainly these kinds of conservation measures are highlighted during those events. We also host school children, particularly elementary age school children, and inner city schools where the kids have very limited access to agriculture and to farm life. And during all of those events, we highlight our conservation measures on the farm. And, you know, I'll even go back further. I talked about 23 years ago and this facility, but we've added grass waterways on the farm with livestock within Washington County. We maintain a significant amount of grassland, pasture land, and hayland of the total land that we operate. And of course, all of that provides good filtration and nutrient absorption to protect water quality. And we're very, very proud of that. But I'll go back even to the 1960s when my father installed some livestock watering facilities on the farm that are still being used today. And Manager Preiner, it was your father Bernard that actually did the installation of those ponds. So we're excited about the project. We are seeking additional funding through the NRCS because of the total cost of this project. To the points that Manager Wagaman made, you know, this facility adds very little value, if any, to the farm, you know, as far as the real estate value, largely because we're in an urbanizing area. And, you know, if the farm were ever sold outside the family, it likely is not going to be sold for agricultural purposes. So, you know, we're excited that another generation has got an interest in the farm and the operation. And I assure you this investment is going to be put to good use and likely will be in place for many years to come. I just want to thank the board for your leadership and for your vision in continuing to work with agricultural property owners in providing funding assistance for water quality projects such as this one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to number 2, or Patrick.
Madam President? Madam President, this is Steve. I had my mic on mute. Could I just answer one thing to Mr. Miron? I just want to make sure that you don't think that I was aiming that at you, because that was not meant to be a comment on your project at all, because I think the project's a fantastic project, and I'm under no illusions you're doing it to make money or anything like that. I just meant on a general basis, when it is in a business, I think we should at least look at that. And I have no problem at all with the project here. So I just want that clear for you.
Madam Chair and Manager Wagaman, no offense taken. You know, I think you're doing your job by asking those kinds of questions, and I appreciate you know, the question, but no offense taken on that. And I just assure you that I believe that this is a good investment from a water quality standpoint. You know, from a financial investment standpoint, you know, there simply are much better things that I could be doing to show a return. But thank you.
I believe it.
Okay, we're going to move on.
President Preiner, Board of Managers, the rule revision item starts on page 92 of the packet. The completed draft rule language was considered for final board comment at the August 10th workshop on Monday. Based on that discussion, a few final revisions have been implemented as a result, including a couple changes to definitions. So I believe that Chris Hotterness here is going to share his screen, and we can kind of quickly highlight, you know, a couple of those changes that have been made since Monday.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Zoom in, please.
Zoom in a little, if you can. There you go, that's better.
Okay.
Yep. So the first here is for the ASIC, the as constructed and subsequently improved condition. The proposed change here is the legally established geometry of the public drainage system as constructed and subsequently modified through drainage code procedures. Does get rid of that repair language. And then based on the resource of concern discussion as well, It was sort of outdated here, referencing a table from the 2010 Watershed Management Plan. Obviously we've gone through and done the 2020 here. So this change would be to eliminate some of that language. Now say that lakes identified in figures C1A through C1E, and then remaining here, the last part, if an area within the jurisdictional boundary of the district drains to a location outside of the district without reaching an ROC, the district will identify the receiving water outside of the district, that is the ROC, for the purpose of the permit.
Madam President?
Yes, go ahead.
Patrick, the other day, Manager Wynett made a comment about the map that was involved with the resource of concern. And I guess I just want to add to her comment. She said it was difficult to read is what she was getting at, I believe. Maybe she'll correct me if I'm wrong here. But in looking at part of that, I didn't see that the entire drainage area for some of those lakes was included. Particularly Rice Lake and Hugo, it was a rather small area where it's about 4 square miles that actually drain into Rice Lake and Egg Lake together. So the map itself didn't really clarify for me what the actual resource of concern was, or the area outside the resource of concern. That's just my comment.
And Madam President, this is Manager Wegman. I do have a comment too when it's appropriate.
Do we want to go page by page on this? Finish off the thought and then go to the next comments, or how does everybody want to do it? Do you want to address John's concern, Patrick, or
well, just a comment, Pat. I will write to my concern and submit them in letter form a little later. We still have time here. It's just that came to my mind is watching that because he brought this particular one up. That's all.
I think mine's fairly quick too. If
go ahead then. Yep.
Okay. One thing is where we're looking, where in the resource of concern, the "and" that's underlined in blue should be "a" instead of "and." That's just something I happen to notice, but that's not my real comment. On the other one, the first one, I actually talked to Nick yesterday and was completely enlightened by him and was completely comfortable and satisfied. But now I see the new language, and I haven't seen that before. That new language there on the as constructed. I'm just wondering what the significance of the change is. Is there anything there? I mean, is there a significance? I mean, sure there is, but what is it?
Madam President, I could speak to that.
Go ahead, Chris.
So one thing that we recognized in taking a look at the definition, and certainly we appreciate you bringing the issue up on Monday, Manager Wageman, because when we looked at that, we recognized that a part of the language in our definition doesn't match what the how the term "as constructed and subsequently improved condition" is utilized within the drainage statute, particularly where we state on there including all subsequent legal repairs. It's important to note that repairs do not weigh into the consideration of what the as constructed or subsequently improved condition is. It would only be items that require a drainage code proceeding, such as an improvement, a realignment, impoundment, so on and so forth. There's a number of these kind of proceedings that could affect that as constructed and subsequently improved condition of the drainage code. So that's why we suggested this change in the definition, so that it really refers to items that are legally established through proceedings occurring under the drainage code.
Okay, I think I understood all that. Thank you.
President Preiner?
Go ahead.
Point of clarification for Chris or the regulatory group. Chris, this doesn't change the administration to process, if you will. We see the the definition as having the same meaning in our administration as it did previously. It's just now that the words we're using within this definition closer reflect that administration. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We how we've administered and determined the as constructed and subsequently improved condition was based on the statute 103 and the drainage code language. It did not relate to how the rule definition was. So what we're really doing is changing the rule definition to both match the statute and our how we've done our business to date and those determinations.
A bit of housekeeping.
Okay, thank you for the extra information there. That helps.
All right.
President Preiner,
Go ahead.
thank you. As a second item into Manager Waller's comment, certainly if he wishes to submit further comment under the comment period of the rules, that's great. For all those involved here, as I noted before, the maps that we're referring to for resources of concern are printed for a practical matter by 8.5 by 11. They're larger in the actual rule. It is a GIS mapping convention, so we can zoom in to property level. And certainly under any application, the detail of the topography of the property will come into play in defining the definitive ROC on the landscape. You can't represent it practically on paper.
One other thing I will also note to add to Administrator Tomczyk's comment is that when we look at the definition for resource of concern drainage area, the important thing to note, and I'll highlight this here, it says the resource of concern drainage area excludes lands draining first to an upstream resource of concern. And so, for instance, if we look at Rice Lake, that area would be excluded from the Peltier resource of concern because it's already considered within its own resource of concern. And that may be part of the confusion that may be seen from the maps as well, is that we're really only looking at each individual lake in the area coming to it rather than the cumulative area.
And further, President Preiner, if I may, Chris, the mapping, it largely has a tie-in with the development or use of the district-wide model and the scale at which that is at to identify these watersheds, correct?
That is correct. And that's really what the resource concern drainage areas is based off of the work that we've done with the district-wide model to determine and delineate those areas coming to each one.
Thank you.
So Madam President?
Yes.
Yeah, I wasn't confused about Peltier Lake versus Rice Lake, Chris. I'm not worried about that designation. But rather, when you take a look at Rice Lake on the map, as we were looking at it the other day, it really doesn't show the entire 4 square miles that drain in there with the outlines that you have in the red lines. So that's what I was getting at. I realized that later on you're going to look at it, but Rice Lake has about a 4 square mile drainage area in there. And you didn't show anything in the resource of concern for Rice Lake below 137th Street or County Road 8, as we call it. And yet there's a tremendous amount of drainage that comes in there and all along those areas. So that's what I was getting at, was that I thought the maps, again, in the general sense from this macro view could be a little more definite about what area the general area is. And then if you need a more micro look at it, that you could zoom in later on. That was what I was getting at, Chris. Thank you.
Right. President Preiner, if I could further.
Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. It dawns on me in the moment that it may be useful for me to ask Mr. Otterness if there is the potential or likelihood that the resource of concerns as we're defining them deviate from or are distinctly different from the benefited parties or those on the rolls for the public drainage system.
Madam President, to address Administrator Tomczyk's comment there, yes, I would say that the benefiting landowner roles really don't have a role in this at all, and they are distinctly different from the drainage area coming to it. To address Manager Waller's comment concern, certainly it probably would be worth us taking a second look at that drainage area into Rice Lake, noting his concern that we may be missing some area in there, and we could take another look at that just to make sure we are capturing that area and that we haven't inadvertently not considered a drainage pathway that delivers water into Rice Lake. So, we have done our previous work on repair reports related to JD2 that we could draw from and take a second look at to make sure those drainage areas that we looked at back then jive with what we're showing on these maps for the ROC.
Madam President, so Chris, what I'm seeing here is that some places I don't mean to belabor this too much. Some places I've seen the map area for for Rice Lake properly drawn, where I think it includes all the 4 square miles. But on the map we were talking about on Monday that we were looking at, that one had a much smaller area. So that's why it seems to me to be confusing. And that's my end of the comments here. That's all.
President Preiner.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just note that these are all very good things. Right now, the rule as written represents our what we believe to be accurate detail. Certainly, any of these internal or external comments we can take a look at before we adopt the final rule revision. I do believe Patrick has a couple of more items to note for the board.
Let's go ahead.
Yep, I believe there are 2 further changes. Yeah, so this one is based off of comments from Monday with C6E. Further language here for the public linear piece. The water quality treatment volume for reconstructed impervious surface, if required by subsection 2C, must be provided only to the extent feasible. So that's the key there. Yes, it's the reference to subsection 2C.
Good.
And I believe the last one here is that opening paragraph for Rule G, realigning the sentences per manager comment.
Any comments on that?
No, that's good.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, I think.
Excellent. So, yep, just a few revisions here. None of these change the administration of the rule, but should help to provide additional clarity. We will have the Houston Engineering technical memo and the memo from Smith Partners updated here with these final changes. And then at this time, the staff is recommending that the board approve the resolution to notice the proposed rule change for public comment and to set a public hearing date of September 23rd, 2020.
The resolution is on page 93. Anybody like?
Madam President, I'd like to move resolution number 2020-20, directing distribution of proposed rule revisions and notice of public hearings. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute 103D.341, district administrator should distribute proposed rule documents as presented in the August 12, 2020 board meeting packet. Good enough.
Okay. We have a second.
I am Manager Wageman. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion second for resolution 2020-20.
President Preiner, just for clarity in the record, reference the board packet, but obviously we've shown you a few changes that weren't in the packet materials, and my understanding is the motion and the second reflect that.
The motion does.
Yes.
My second also does.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Your roll call vote, Manager Waller,
Yes.
Manager Winan,
Yeah.
Manager Bradley,
Yes.
Manager Wageman,
Yes.
and Manager Preiner. Yes, motion passes. Okay, thank you for getting that rule together.
Thank you.
And we'll go on to, the register.
President Preiner,
Yes.
Go ahead.
you had a new item 3.
Oh, that's sorry. I'm sorry. Yep, we do. Okay, Manager Waller?
So we'll make this fairly short. President Pryor, I'll move that the board as a body waive the attorney-client privilege and provide the work descriptions to be public information.
Okay, we need a second. Need a second? No second, so it dies from lack of a second, I believe. Thank you, John. Number
You're welcome.
4.
Madam President, can I make a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
So as an attorney, used to ex-attorney, the importance of why you don't waive generically attorney-client privilege is that the next time you want to assert it, it makes it look different. So you ought to be selective when you waive an attorney-client privilege with a select reason for doing so. Carte blanche waiver is not good policy. It would also mean that our attorney would be hesitant, reluctant to adequately explain the basis for his billings in the going forward. I just don't think it's a good policy. That's my reason.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we're going to move on.
Okay, Madam President, I would move to approve the check register dated August 12, 2020 in the amount of $43,596.01 prepared by Red Path and Company.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Will be a roll call. Manager Waller,
Yes.
Manager Wynant,
Yes.
Manager Wageman,
Yes.
Manager Bradley,
Yes.
and Manager Pryor. Yes, motion passes. Okay, I think engineers update. Anybody have any questions on the engineers update? Any questions? If not, we'll go to the
Madam President?
Oh, go ahead.
Just note here real quickly, update for the board on the 2 construction projects going on. First of all, Judicial Ditch 3, just want to give you an update. They've completed tree clearing operations out there. Currently working on doing excavation of the open channel and replacement of culverts along the way there. So they're working right along there. They're making very good progress on it. And it seems like they are definitely moving on schedule or maybe even ahead of schedule on that project. So we're very happy with the progress to date. The other district project, the Bald Eagle Lake Iron Enhanced Sand Filter, that will be getting going very shortly here. I don't believe they've started any work on site, but they plan to do so, I believe, starting either by the end of this week or early next. I don't know if Kyle has anything to add on that at all.
I think they started the brush clearing and such.
Sure.
Madam Chair, Kyle here. Yes, yesterday activities were started at the Ditch 11 Iron Enhanced Sand Filter site. just confirming yes. Tree clearing was underway. I would imagine they'll be done today with that. Major activities will begin next week with excavation and ditch diversion and all of that. So.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Anything else on that? Okay, we'll move on to Privy Lake Outlet.
All right. So that's me. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I think we're at a time where we just want to kind of bring you back to the Privy Lake outlet situation. We've briefed you on this previously. Earlier this spring, Houston Engineering began work on a conditions assessment for that system. I'm going to share my screen here. If you don't mind, we'll just walk through a couple figures and some results from their conditions assessment report, which has been made available. And we have shared this with the city of White Bear Lake, as well as Birchwood and Matamidi. Again, this is a kind of a unique system, a project that was built by the Watershed District back in the late 70s under petition by the cities of White Bear Lake and Birchwood Village. It does, however, again, cross through 3 municipalities, the 3 I mentioned, and 2 counties. Begins here in Ramsey County at the outlet of Privy Lake, and then very quickly moves into Washington County and through these 3 cities down to Halls Marsh, and which then discharges into White Bear Lake through the Halls Marsh outlet, which is a district facility. The Privy Lake outlet system, again, it was built to control flooding that was occurring. Homes were being flooded on Privy Lake back in the 1960s after that development was constructed. And it was built and has largely been untouched since that time. The outlet control structure at the lake itself has been noted to be in poor condition by the city of White Bear Lake. They've repaired it multiple times, patches and new baffles and things, and it's just gotten to the point that we needed to take a look at it. I will note that this outlet system was not included as a district facility in our watershed management plan. The report touches on that a little bit in the recommendations. But before I get to all of that, I'll just touch on some of the other figures that are in here. One of the great things about getting this work done is that we now have an up-to-date and current plan and profile for the entire system, which is included in the report. The old construction plans from the 1970s that we had on file were incomplete. And so again, that's a nice benefit for the district to have that in place. This is the design of the existing outlet structure. It is a very odd and unique structure in our watershed. It's out in the middle of the lake. It's not exactly safe for either district staff or city staff to get out to it. You have to jump across the lake to get to it for inspection. And these baffles are constantly damaged by ice. This flange is in bad condition. Again, I'll show you some pictures. This is the structure when it was being inspected in March. There's still some ice on the lake, but you can see it's again a very, very odd structure. You can see here some patchwork that's been done. I don't know if this flange could even be removed and replaced if we needed to draw the lake down at this time without, again, replacing that. And so that's one of the things the report notes, is that structure is in a state of disrepair, and we believe it's exceeded its useful life. We also televised the entire system, top to bottom. In general, thankfully, we found that the pipe segments are in very good shape, and that was a concern, but it is no longer a concern. There are some places where there is debris in the pipe. This is right, you can see the outlet in the background there. And there's a cement slab here. Presumably it was some sort of a patch effort at some point over the life of the system. If this was leaking here, that's really unclear at this time, but there is a cement slab there. There's some wire, that's made its way into the pipe. That's also very near the outlet. This is also near the outlet. There's some sealant between 2 pipe sections that is coming in and has failed. Noting a couple figure, just showing an example of some water leakage through one of the pipes. This is all, again, at the very top of the system. We've got a rock slab in there. And then one thing that's very interesting to me, and this is way downstream in the system, there's a manhole cover in there, and I have no idea how we get that out. But presumably that made its way in during construction of the system. I'm not sure how else that would have made it in. But so again, just wanted to share that with you. The recommendation of the report, if I can get back to the top here, really does recommend replacing that outlet control structure at the lake, along with some minor maintenance in the storm sewer to remove debris where we can get to it. Houston Engineering took a crack at a cost estimate for the project, and we're hitting right around $50,000 for construction and engineering. That doesn't necessarily include removal of debris from the pipe system itself. As far as we know, flows are moving through there fine. We've talked to city staff to see if there's any known flooding concerns, downstream on the system, and there are none that have been noted. There are two potential modifications that we found to the system post-construction, and because there are two laterals that are noted. One is right here, right along East County Line Road. There's a small stormwater pond right here where my cursor is, and that pond discharges into the Preview Lake outlet pipe system. What is unclear is whether or not that outlet was constructed as a part of the project or not. That lateral is noted, and the outlet of that pond into the system is noted in some preliminary engineering reports from the 70s, but it doesn't seem to be shown on the set of final construction plans that we were able to find. So that's kind of a question. And then there's out in Matamidi here, right out kind of out in the middle of the woods, there's another small lateral that comes into the system that it just takes surface drainage from kind of a depression area in the woods back here. Not likely to be too much of a concern, but we suspect that may have been added at some point in time after the project was constructed. One interesting thing to note as well as we move from Preview Lake down, and maybe I can show this on one of these profiles here, is where the system goes kind of underneath, really through Matamidi. There are places, if that would stop flashing on us. Anyway, the system is in places over 40 feet below grade. So it's very, very good to hear that we don't need to be replacing pipes 40 feet beneath homes, because in some places it does run underneath residential property. So that's that. As far as the recommendation of the report, we can talk to more details about that. Chris is on the line as well. But I did want to also talk about where we are at in exploring actual replacement of this outlet structure at the lake. As I mentioned, the system was omitted from our watershed management plan. In order for us to, sorry, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. In order for us to actually undertake a project here, we will need to add the Preview Lake outlet project back to our watershed management plan as a district facility. The report talks about that. We think the existence of the project as a petitioned construction project of the district, and the fact that it, again, runs through multiple municipalities and 2 counties, it's very difficult for the district to absolve itself of ownership of this system. And so, staff's recommendation is that the board would, at some point in the future here, consider amending the watershed plan, or it'd be a clarification maybe. I have to look at the exact process of that, but to add this project back to the list. Once that's done, then if we were to proceed with the project, there'd be public hearing to set aside funds for the construction. Again, we're looking at roughly $50,000. I think it potentially could be a little bit more than that, depending on the details of construction and what is needed there in terms of restoration. And that's the one other thing that I wanted to show you yesterday, and I will share a different screen here. Bear with me. All right, so this is looking at the east end of Preview Lake. We've got East County Line Road running north and south on the screen, and then Riviera north and south here. yesterday morning, I met with City of White Bear Lake staff to kind of scout this site to see how we might get access to it. The outlet structure is right here in this corner of the lake. The district does not currently own any easement rights or access over any of the system or to the outlet structure itself. The City of White Bear Lake has, I believe, 5 feet either side of the lot line drainage easements running through these parcels. The city's never had issue, and district staff has never had issue just, entering through this homeowner's fence to come back and inspect the structure here, and the city has again completed some maintenance in the past. So the city public works director and environmental coordinator and I, Paul Kauppi and Connie Talon and I, were out here. We actually met with this homeowner that's directly adjacent to the east of the outlet structure. She was home. We had a great conversation with her, and we're very positive that we would be able to obtain access to the site between these two homes. It'd be a winter construction project, likely in the winter of 2021, 2022 is kind of what we're thinking about. And that we'd be able to get, small equipment through here and probably around through her yard to the south here to gain access to the site. This is a large retaining wall here. She's got some gardens and things, but according to her, they just bought the house last fall or last year, and nothing is precious to them, which is great news because access to this outlet structure, it's steep from all angles, and there's really no good way down there without either moving this other neighbor's shed out of the way. We do have to remove some fencing to get through. So there's some difficulty. The other avenue that we were thinking about access was off of East County Line Road, but then we're dealing with, in this case now, at least 3 or 4 property owners. There are gardens and a lot more fencing in the way to get through here. And I think we're fortunate that these two homes here are spread apart enough. They're certainly farther apart than other homes in the neighborhood that we think we can safely get equipment through here once that chain link fence is removed. And that's likely the case as there, again, the Privy Lake outlet pipe runs through between these houses. There's also an additional storm sewer pipe from the road that dumps into Privy Lake they both run in parallel right here. So again, just wanted to give you an update as to what we were looking at there. There's a lot of steps that need to occur. One of the things that would make construction easier here as well would be to actually draw the lake down in the winter. In order to do so, it's a public water. It requires a permit from DNR and consent of 75% of the property owners on the basin. So there's outreach that needs to be done in order to try and get that consent before we do that. Otherwise, it'd be a matter of building a cofferdam around the structure. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Again, discussions are still ongoing with the city as it related to potential partnerships on this, who's doing what. I don't have much to report to the board on that front at this time. But again, we've got the rest of this year and most of next, most likely before we'd even be considering undertaking or asking the board to consider undertaking a project at this location. So, but the good news is we have the report in and generally good bill of health, I think, which is very critical to note, with the exception of that particular structure. So with that, again, I'm open to any questions the board might have for myself, or again, Chris is on the line here as well. That's what we've got for you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Any questions for Kyle?
Madam President, Bradley, Kyle, in the last sentence of your memo, or Houston's memo, page 5, says Rice Creek should explore engaging with each municipalities to seek their assistance in future inspection and maintenance activities. Do you have kind of a going in position of what you think they should provide? I mean, before you do that, you got to know what you want. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Again, we've had some of those discussions, both in this case with the city of White Bear Lake, and then we've had some preliminary internal discussions with staff about what this looks like. I think any future agreement or project agreement we would have to assign roles and responsibilities would need to define that. I think when you start talking, White Bear Lake has had a more active role because it's the outlet is a lake in their city. They get calls from residents. They've been out there. Birchwood and Matamidi are a little bit different. Matamidi was never a participant, even with the original project. And the system has very little impact on Matamidi, let's say. Their storm sewer does not discharge into the system. And I think I don't know that we're going to have, it would be wise even to have their involvement on this. Birchwood is a similar situation. There's, any storm sewer they have does not discharge into the system. Ultimately they receive water in Hulls Marsh. But we can continue discussions on that, and likely there'd be some arrangement with White Bear Lake for hopefully like some, day-to-day monitoring or receiving calls on it. But it's very likely, again, we know it really should be a district facility and likely should be the district's responsibility.
Thank you.
President Preiner, just to follow up on that, I think the comment is well taken. I think maybe Houston's memo was written at a time and based on the watershed management plan of the inclusion of a facility or not. And if I'm not mistaken, the language of the plan speaks to it, does the record have another entity maintaining it, so on and so forth. And before we knew a lot of the detail of this, the entirety of this system, we went with exploring what those other cities may have done historically. White Bear Lake has, I guess, graciously had an interest in maintaining this system, although as Kyle indicates, it certainly has a sound origin under the district's authorities and our purposes in bringing it into being. Kyle, for clarity, and moving on from there, you noted the access route, and I understood you to say that was for construction purposes, and I'm wondering if there's an interest in a long-term easement and these types of things that might be helpful in the future. It's kind of the challenge that we'll run into now, certainly with the scope of work that's explored within the technical memo. Some of those things that are much further downstream in the linear distance of the system, there are no easements in those locations, and I'm not suggesting exploring for those now, but it was part of the district's facilities program, if you will, to obtain easements and make sure when these were functional and a benefit and continued in the interest of the district, that we obtain those easements, and so that we could continue maintenance and preservation of the public's tax dollar and those things they invested in. Kyle, was there an interest in a long-term easement there at all?
I think as the memo recommends, I think from Riviera Drive down to the outlet structure, I think that would be advisable for us to seek something there. The reality is also the city does have a 10-foot swath through there that they currently have with along the lot line. I don't know that we would obtain anything much wider through there. So, depending on how that goes, it could be a duplicative overlapping type of drainage easement, and I don't, we'll have to see what value there is in that for us. The city has been a willing partner, but I that's something that would be in play. I would also note that it's likely that because of the realities of, stuff that the landowners have in those locations, the actual access route might be a little more circuitous to get down to that structure, and that would be something that when you went in there, that'd be kind of a temporary, access agreement at that time. But yeah, I think it would be advisable for the district to get some sort of legal agreement to access at least that outlet structure and that pipe that to cover that pipe out to the road. I think that would be certainly a good first step. The rest of it, much of the system is within road right of way in the city of White Bear Lake and in Birchwood, although not entirely. In some cases, I believe it goes underneath two houses. So I mean, that's a difficult one to deal with, so. And it's
Madam
40 feet
President,
below grade.
Go ahead.
Madam President, if I may, just to add on to what Nick and Kyle were saying, if we were to look at this, if this were a public drainage system, the road authorities would be responsible for the crossings where the public drainage system would be crossing. In this case, it's not a public drainage system. It's something that was done under statute 103D. There isn't, at least as far as I'm aware of, an analogous responsibility for the road authorities to maintain those locations where the project crosses. But it's still, in many cases, may be more efficient and more preferable to have the road authority be engaged in maintaining or inspecting portions of the system where the project is within the road right of way. And that was part of what our recommendation was at least having some engagement with the cities to talk about that. And I understand the manager's concern about having a position reinforced before you engage in those discussions so that we go in under the right tenor on that. But certainly, I think there is value there in having engagement and at least attempting engagement so that the road authority in their operations that the work that we'd be proposing would be at least in alignment with how they manage their roads there.
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Yes, if I could just add, I agree with everything that's been said, especially about the cooperative relationship with the city. The one thing I would add in terms of the merit of the district having its own separate easement is that typically these municipal easements are a simple drawing on a plat that just say drainage and utility. And that doesn't say very much. And we have found a number of instances where the property owner will dispute what that phrase means and whether or not it includes the right of the district, not the city, to come onto the property and do, significant construction or repair work. So we would recommend in this situation that you have an easement that specifically meets the district needs, while at the same time you're cooperating with the city in this work.
Great, thank you, Louis.
Welcome. Anything else on this?
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Well, first, Louis, nice earphones and professional broadcasting background.
Thank you very much, Manager Waller.
Wonderful to see downtown Minneapolis up so close.
You'll recall that's a mural in my office.
Oh, I didn't remember that, but thank you for the refresher. My questions about this, Kyle, are simple. What's it's called Preview Lake. What's the actual acreage of it?
Oh, that's a good question, Manager Waller. I want to say it's about 7 acres.
Yeah, so usually it's about 10 acres to be a DNR public water, isn't it?
Within the metro area, I believe they identified water bodies over 5 acres.
Okay. All right. And then the next question is, what was the condition of this depression, which is now a lake, prior to the residential development?
It was a shallow wetland.
It was a what?
Sorry, there's some interference here. It was a shallow wetland, I believe, in the old farm field there.
So any particular kind of type, like type 1 or 2 or?
That I do not know.
So this has been excavated then from what it was prior to development?
That is correct.
And the purpose of it was the purpose of it primarily as a stormwater pond then?
Stormwater pond / amenity in the development is my understanding.
Okay, because the nomenclature to be used, Preview Lake, is kind of misleading. It really ought to be Preview Stormwater Pond then.
Yeah. Madam President.
Even though the DNR says 5 acre stormwater ponds are so to me, that's I think an important change because that word lake in Minnesota, it's just thrown around so loosely all the time. But this is really just Preview Stormwater Pond.
Yeah.
which is,
Madam President, Manager Waller, if I may, I understand exactly where you're going with that line of questioning. I would tend to agree with you. It's a constructed basin. It's very similar to what we dealt with in Hanson Park in New Brighton,
yeah.
where we had another constructed pond, in that case held up by a dam constructed by the city, and both constructed just prior to the public water inventory by DNR in the early 70s. Both basins included in that inventory. In the case of Hanson, as you may recall, we petitioned DNR to have that pond removed from the public inventory on multiple grounds. DNR denied that petition. Mirror Pond in St. Anthony is another similar one that is a constructed basin, and previously the city had petitioned DNR years ago to have that removed and was denied. I believe they requested it again when that project was completed in the last few years, and they were denied again. I do not think DNR is in a position to be relinquishing its jurisdiction over these small constructed ponds in the metro. I think Preby is likely no different. As much as I would agree it may not need to be on the public water inventory, it nonetheless is there. Preby Lake, furthermore, is actually identified as a impaired water on the state 303D list. So there are other, PCA concerns with this basin as well. And I think it's the nature of what we're dealing with. But lake, no lake, it's about 6 feet deep. So,
Madam President, Kyle, I understand the reluctance of the Department of Natural Resources, as I often refer to them as the do-nothing rangers, and that's what their situation is there. These constructed stormwater ponds is the do-nothing after their inventory. But maybe we could have somewhere, because there are so many of these, you've just named off 3 of them already, that we have an additional designation to define them as stormwater ponds, so that in the future they need to be cleaned, that we wouldn't have a problem with that, that the department would recognize it, or we could start to, have some, a new definition of it. Not just remove it from the public waters list, but to realize that it's a particular kind of public water that acts primarily as a stormwater pond, and therefore subject to dredging or repair or other things, and not like a regular or accepted not a meandering or non-meandering lake. Mm-hmm. And that's all I'm asking. That's something to look at as we go forward. Try to see if we can get a new definition in there that give us more flexibility, so that you don't have an argument from people saying, "Well, that's a public water, you can't do that," and really it functions as a stormwater pond. It needs to have maintenance to it periodically, maybe only every 30 years, but nevertheless needs maintenance.
Sure. Madam President, Manager Waller, just to add on to that, the city of White Bear Lake, in conjunction with this, they are considering, as they have multiple storm sewer outlets into this lake that they manage, they are also trying to plan for at what point do they do some dredging there to clean sediment out of the lake that has accumulated. Again, if we get to a point that we can do a drawdown, whether it's for the construction of this project or sometime in the future, that's likely when they would go in and do that. The city has done that before, maybe maybe 10 years ago or so. We don't have an exact date. And I will say to date, and with Hanson Park and Mirror as well, while DNR was unwilling to remove the water bodies from their public water inventory, they were not particularly difficult at all to deal with in terms of obtaining the permissions that we needed to do what we needed to do in terms of dredging and construction of those projects. And I wouldn't expect that Preby would be much different again. And that's just, maybe a testament to the staff that are in place currently. So I understand that's not necessarily a permanent situation. But our experiences of late have been positive in situations like this.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Anything further for Kyle, or we're going to move on?
Madam President, this is Manager Wagman. I just had a comment, and when I was reading this, I was thinking, man, this is going to cost a fortune. And I was actually mildly surprised at the price. Not that it's cheap, but it's actually a whole lot cheaper than I thought it was going to be when I was reading the text of everything before I got to that. Just a comment, that's all.
We can't do this under a repair or something, can we? Okay, let's move on. Everybody ready? I think Marcus Green is up. Morning.
Alrighty. Good morning. How are you guys?
Good.
Everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. President
Yes.
Reiner, Board of Managers. My name is Marcus Green. I'm the Watershed Technician and Water Resource Specialist here at the district. Similar to a lot of the other presentations, I'll go into a little bit of my background. Then I'll talk a bit about what I do here, which is really related to communications and outreach, and also a little bit of the regulatory program. I'll talk about challenges RCWD is seeing now and that I'm seeing it through RCWD, and then things that I'm looking forward to while working here. So my background, I got an environmental science policy and management major from the University of Minnesota. I knew I wanted to go into some sort of water resource or water science, so I also got a water science minor while I was there. Experience, I was an intern for lake restoration and doing aquatic herbicide treatments all around the state of Minnesota, where I'd spray aquatic herbicides in lakes for, you know, curlyleaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, all those undesirable non-native plants. And then throughout my college career, I was also a research assistant with the USDA ARS Cereal Disease Lab, where we studied cereal rust diseases and those diseases pertaining to rye and wheat. After my junior year of college, I was the intern here at RCWD in 2018, really working on communications and outreach. Went back for my senior year of college and then started full time in May of 2019, working mostly for the regulatory team. Here's a couple pictures of some things I do here. So here's me, Terrence, Ashley, and Kyle working on the iron enhanced sand filters out at Hanson Park. There's a rain garden over here. I'll talk a little bit about BNP maintenance work that we're looking forward to. Then down here, I also put a little information about Blue Thumb. I administer the mini grant program, so we work with a lot of native plants that improve water quality. And Blue Thumb is a good program that really helps us out with that. So my two programs I work with at the district are the regulatory program and the communications and outreach program. So the regulatory program, we administer rules to protect water resources in the district, as well as provide knowledge and tools for communities and landowners for the permitting process. And then for communication and outreach, we support communities through communication, outreach, and education. And then we also support stakeholders such as cities, other public agencies, legislators, and other leaders. I like to see myself somewhere in the middle of this where, you know, we have the regulatory rules that we need to enforce and administer, but also educating people and communicating them through that work. Kind of a deep dive into my inspector and regulatory work. So I've been on the regulatory team since I started here in May of 2019. As Terrence talked about in his presentation, there's really two sides to it. So there's the technical side. I do a little bit of permit review, mostly for amended permits that come in that have changes or for after the fact permit where a violation is present. And then I also do as-built reviews. So we get surveys from projects that come in. The as-built shows whether the projects were built correctly and if the stormwater treatment or wetland restoration or things like that are in compliance with the permit. I also do site inspections. So you can see Terrence's area to the north there is Blaine, Lino Lakes, Columbus, and Forest Lake. My area is a little bit more to the southwest, where it's Hennepin County, Columbia Heights, Ridley, and Mounds View. And then I do have a couple of sites in Blaine and Lino Lakes, but that's more so of Terrence's zone. Through that work, we also use GIS to give information to permittees and landowners and anybody who needs that sort of information. Then we also have agency coordination, working with state agencies and also our cities to make sure that we're all working towards one same goal. On the communication side, we do deal with some conflict resolution. This could be for sites, permittees and contractors who aren't keeping up with their permit terms, or even people who are in violation of district rules who don't need a permit, maybe don't think they need a permit, and dealing with situations like that. We also convey technical information to permit holders and landowners who may not have the information available to know what needs to be done. That also kind of goes with educating landowners, applicants, and contractors about district rules, things that might have happened on the properties in the past, other things like that. And then we always want to communicate to stakeholders such as cities, counties, and state agencies about the things we're doing and the things we're seeing in the field. Taking a step back to my communication and outreach portion of my job, one thing I've been working on lately is the FEMA CRS program, and that stands for Community Rating System. So we recently updated the floodplain model for both RCWD, and that was in conjunction with FEMA. So now with an updated model, there's changes to the floodplain. There could be more people within the floodplain. So it's kind of a proactive step to say, you know, there could be more people under the FEMA floodplain that might need flood insurance. So we're reaching out to our cities, kind of letting them know that there are programs out there to lower the cost of flood insurance that may be needed now because of the new updated model. And with that, we give them information on the program, and RCWD also could have information that would help in an application for this program. But it would really be more so on the cities to be applying for the community rating system and getting those discounts. I also administer the RCWD mini grant program, so everyone can improve water quality through their personal behaviors, choices, and commitments. As you guys probably know, mini grant program is $500 for native plants, small buffer strips, rain barrels, assisting with land care choices that positively impact water and kind of changing the norm of landscaping. So you get all of these little projects and you can have them, you know, on small residential properties, but the more you have them, the better it is for water quality within the district. And not so much a grant program opportunity, but also as an educational opportunity. We see this as, you know, I have a project on my property. Someone driving by can see it and say, hey, that's something easy I could do on my property as well. And throughout a vast array of the district, you could have very good water quality benefits through small projects. As Lauren has been talking about lately, there's an RCWD agriculture initiative within the water quality grant program. So water quality grants are usually for stormwater ponds, shoreline stabilizations, maybe some wetland stuff. So we've been working on engaging more of the rural areas of the district, such as Anoka County and Washington County, engaging in a conversation about what kind of grant programs they are looking for. I know we sent out a postcard as well as a survey for the answer and kind of start that conversation of what they're looking for. Hopefully this will increase and foster participation in the rural areas of the district and have them participate more within our program. Kind of the last thing I'll touch on I do for the district is as an intern in 2018, so I do know how that kind of side of the job works and what they do here. So I've been offering some leadership for the internship members. So for the intern program, they assist with communication and outreach team and also participate in water quality monitoring. I also helped draft up the application for the Green Corps member. As we discussed back in April, they will create and develop a program for maintenance of green infrastructure BMPs. Kind of bridging the way between regulatory and having to maintain their BMPs, and then also giving them materials so they can voluntarily do it as well. The Green Corps member will also assist with some communications and outreach work. So I'll jump into some of the challenges we're seeing. Terrence noted this on his presentation as well, is increased development within RCWD. So we are kind of on that urban fringe where we have the cities to the south and kind of rural areas to the north. And we're in this area where there's a lot of commercial development as well as a lot of residential development. So there's a lot of permitting going on. So there is a good need for regulatory oversight and inspection. So it is a lot that's out there, but we are out there looking at it. Varying levels of partners, support, and engagement. So we do have cities that are really good at participating with enforcement or being on site doing inspections and things like that. And we have some cities that just aren't as forward and aren't coming to the table for participation in these conversations. So really dealing with some of those cities that aren't at the table is proving to be somewhat of a challenge. Lack of knowledge and engagement by contractors and applicants. I think something that I see a lot is that we have people that go through the permitting process and they think they're done when that's really just the beginning. You know, you have stormwater BMPs to maintain, erosion control BMPs to maintain. So we really need to be out there and educating them on what needs to be done now that they have the permit in their hands. lack of knowledge and understanding of watersheds and watershed districts. So I see this mostly through the lens of violations. So there might be a violation of district rules. We go out, we talk to them, let them know that they might need a permit and they might not even know we exist. So it's a good educational opportunity to say, hey, this is what we do. We regulate floodplain or we regulate wetland, and this is what you did on your property, and here's how we fix it. Last note, I have a whole slide on this. So exacerbation of issues due to COVID-19. I don't think it's a secret. We've seen somewhat of an increase in violations as of late. And it seems to be that there's some sort of correlation between COVID-19 and people staying home, not going into work, and these violations. So I think people are at home, they have more time to do improvements on their properties, and this might turn into what they think is an improvement, which is filling floodplain, filling wetland, doing jobs that do trigger permit requirements. So there might be people doing those sorts of things. And then we also have a lot of people at home looking through their windows and seeing other people. So we are seeing an increase of complaints as well. And we take all our complaints very seriously. So we go out, we inspect these, and it's turning into a lot more violations as well. So looking forward, public outreach, looking forward to BMP maintenance for the Green Corps member, especially like between the regulatory program and needing our BMPs maintained, as well as having a voluntary way of doing it and having the resources that they can maintain these BMPs on their own. Looking forward to the Ag Initiative and seeing more projects and participation in the rural areas of the district. Ensuring equity in programs, that kind of goes along with the Ag Initiative, where we're really trying to engage all areas of the district, getting them participating in our programs and services. Taking lessons from COVID-19 and applying them to future communications and efforts. I'm sure you guys heard of the Long Lake violations, where there were 5 different properties that fill within the floodplain. Learning from situations like that, one of them was actually a president on their lake association board. So reaching out to people like that and being able to kind of talk about permitting rules and the things that can and can't be done on their properties. Last I'll note, Terrence talked a little bit about customer service. So when we go out, we do reports. We really want to develop some sort of relationship with the permittees or the contractors on site. So phone calls before sending reports, just to thoroughly go through what's going on, what we've seen, what we need them to do. Also having collaborative meetings, talking about these issues, not just sending the issues at them and having them be confused. And then also providing further resource guidance and questions that the general public or anybody needing a permit might have. So presentation, if you guys have any questions, suggestions, or requests, please let me know.
Any questions? Marcus, nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say the same. I thought that was very informative. Thank you.
President Preiner.
Go ahead.
Yeah, President Preiner, Marcus, President Preiner, you and I had a conversation about the increase in complaints that we had received and violations and this sort of thing. Managers, you typically see a 10-day letter that goes out. I'll let you know that with our discussion, President Preiner and myself, we did have staff revisit that language, a little bit more of an introduction in that document here in the future to say, you know, Rice Creek is a watershed district, that we're a special unit of government, just a little bit to soften our letter coming to these landowners and help in that communication matter. Thank you.
Madam President, Marcus, I thought that was very insightful, that one more unexpected consequence of COVID.
That's really true.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Marcus? If not, we're going to move on to administrator updates.
Yes, President Preiner, Board of Managers. I'll note I've had a little bit of dialogue with DNR in regards to the North and East Metro Groundwater Advisory Team and their work. A lot of that stemmed from the White Bear Lake issue. You may recall that previous manager Hockey was the subcommittee member, if you will, for that, or on that advisory team for the district. I did offer that to Marcy for her to participate in those meetings. She brightly identified if the board would like me to serve in that capacity. I understood her to say she'd be happy to do that. As a slight tangent, I should let you know that I know of no standing assignments to any committees or boards, if you will, or that we have any subcommittee of the board that's standing in the ready. With that, we've been rather informal and maybe ad hoc in these types of things. At your discretion, whether this actually needs a motion or not. Maybe Marcy would like to comment in her willingness to serve, and otherwise this committee, again, the advisory committee to the North and East Metro Groundwater stemming from the White Bear Lake thing typically meets twice a year from what I've seen. I don't know if that would increase or not. So I'll leave it right there and see if anyone has a question or Marcy wanted to comment.
Any comments, Marcy? Am I on?
You're on.
Oh, okay.
Madam President, this is
Go ahead.
I guess the one comment I would offer is that if any member of the board is serving as a representative of the board in the district to some other body, it'd be valuable and important to have the board authorize that representation. So I would recommend that you designate
Madam President,
for this purpose.
Madam President, I move that we designate Representative Wynette, if she agrees, to be the representative on the Metro Groundwater Study Committee, or whatever the proper name is.
Yep.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion.
Yeah,
Louis, I think if you think that should be, maybe we should develop a better process then. If you want us to nominate every time somebody's going to be appointed to a board or subcommittee, do you think we need to do that actually, or just do it as we go?
Madam President, I would recommend a little bit more formality to the process. You know, I would distinguish when managers are attending meetings that are convened by others and you are interested in the subject matter and you attend and you report back, whether it's a conference or some other body. But if you are serving as a representative of the Watershed District to a task force or a body, I think it'd be important that you have the authority to represent by board action.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? We have a motion and a second.
Manager.
Wait. Can you hear
Yep.
me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Marcy.
Okay. So there are a couple things. So there are a couple of things on this particular assignment. I was looking at the list of people that are serving on that committee, and I didn't set for many board members, but they were mostly staff. So in this one, particularly, we want to be clear if it should be a board person or a staff person. I'd be happy to serve on it. I am interested in it. I would imagine Representative Hockey was also Manager Hockey was also very interested in this subject. So I'd be happy to park myself in that one. And then I would also agree, and I didn't know if other managers are assigned to different organizations. So I'm glad to have that clarified. And I would agree that if the manager is serving, representing a watershed, that there has to be, first of all, we have to know who's doing it, and are we doing it with the full faith and credit of the board.
Okay.
President Preiner.
Go ahead.
Manager Wynette. to the one question regarding manager versus staff on the advisory committee, again, of the North and East Metro Groundwater DNR committee. I did have dialogue with, I'm sorry, his name escapes me, but the DNR representative tasked with the committee. He said it's at the discretion of Rice Creek, whether it be staff or manager. Perhaps it's just by chance that you're seeing a number of staff and not as many managers. That is at our discretion. A little bit to Mr. Smith's note on formality here. I'll just note that the appointment representation of Rice Creek, there is within your policy manual, a policy on public communication by managers, if you will. That's maybe slightly involved here. In other words, the policies of the board are the things that you're representing when you're participating in it, although you may have a personal opinion. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, maybe the solution would be is to, if Marcy wants to go in as a manager and maybe she sees fit that it could be staff, you know, we can always readdress it at the time. Because by being in these committees and seeing them, then you understand the point of them more too. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
And I would understand that.
Say it again, Marcy.
I would understand that during the manager's portion of a meeting, following this groundwater meeting, I would report to the full board about what transpired, either verbally or in a memo, some such.
Yeah, so I would say if you're appointed. Yeah. Okay.
So Madam President, as you remember, when they started this study, they neglected to bring the watershed districts in. Manager Hockey was very upset about that, it being a watershed, most of it, this study being in in the Rice Creek watershed district, not even the staff or the managers were consulted, we were excluded. And so with that background, that's why Manager Hockey was, I think, our representative there. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they excluded the staff, the administrators or appropriate staff people were welcome to accompany the manager. So with that was kind of the understanding and background I just wanted to give. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll also further point out that we all attended several of those meetings when they had larger meetings.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winan?
Yeah.
You can vote for yourself. Manager Bradley?
Yes.
My internet.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. And that'll be good. And you can look to report back to us and maybe a staff or whatever you consider we should be changed. Okay, and Nick, continue.
Yes, thank you, President Priner. Just a point of clarity here, Monday's workshop discussion, we were looking at the rule revision and questions were raised about past public drainage system repairs. And I wanted to share with you, perhaps again, but again for clarity. I recognize those concerns that two of the managers were bringing up. Those were specific to certain systems. There may be others, but I've already engaged Mr. Otterness, and I'll work with your district consultants, including Mr. Kolb, since these are public drainage issues, to kind of review those situations and come back to the board to refresh, if you will, on those decisions. Some of the things that were contemplated, why their importance and that sort of thing, certainly won't hurt for future framework of decisions. But maybe more importantly, in the case here for our two managers with their interests, we'll share the options that may exist. Today, with our, what I'll say, maybe a little bit more robust experience the change in the landscape with other agencies, whether that be DNR, Army Corps of Engineers, and those types of things. And also, as well, limitations that may exist, level of risk, what might a different decision achieve. And certainly with that, then the board can decide and direct us if you want to, it warrants further action or you want to somehow engage in these once again. So just a little bit of clarity there. President Preiner and myself had noted the White Bear Lake court decision. You all may have seen it. Smith Partners sends out a nice little newsletter on water issues. We thought it'd be good to include pointing that up and pointing it out to the board. There was also a piece on U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in their defining the waters of their jurisdiction, waters of the U.S., and how that applies. In chatting with Lewis, he noted that he actually did a couple of presentations on this. I believe he has a couple of PowerPoint slides or at a minimum some additional information you can share. And so on the White Bear Lake court decision and what that kind of means, and then also how the jurisdiction for waters of the U.S. might be slightly different than it has been. With that, President Preiner, if Lewis would share with us, I'd appreciate it.
Lewis? Can you hear? There you go.
Yes, I can. Can you see my screen?
There you are.
Good. So I'll be brief. I know the hour is late. I'm just going to quickly jump to a quick report to you on the White Bear Lake case. There we go. Better?
Yes.
All right. So this litigation's been around since 2013. The Homeowners Association around White Bear Lake and a separate association focused on the restoration of the lake brought suit against the DNR, focused on the declining lake levels. There's been a 7-foot range in measured levels to White Bear Lake, as I'm sure you're aware. There are about 70 municipal groundwater appropriation permits in the area around White Bear Lake that have been issued by the DNR. And the record shows that the annual withdrawals from those permits has doubled since 1980. So the associations allege that the DNR, in managing the groundwater appropriation permit program, had essentially been negligent in not tracking the permits carefully, leaving them open-ended in terms of their term, and also not paying attention to the cumulative impact of all of those appropriations. In 2014, in 2013, the district court, Judge Marin in Ramsey County District Court, issued a decision, and she had granted partial summary judgment allowing at least some of the legal theories of those associations to proceed against the DNR. And then there was a 3-year stay in the litigation because there had come to be a settlement agreement and there needed to allow time for that agreement to be implemented. The key piece of that was to pursue state funding to convert from a reliance on groundwater for drinking water systems to surface water. And I would say the broad kind of public policy consensus in the region has been that reliance on groundwater for drinking water systems is not a long-term sustainable approach for the region, and reliance on surface water, essentially for us, the Mississippi River, would be much more sustainable. The legislature never came through with funding for the significant projects that would be involved in that conversion. And so the litigation renewed. In 2017, Judge Marin issued a very broad injunction focused on an area in a 5-mile radius around White Bear Lake, saying no new appropriation permits could be issued, that all of the existing permits had to be reviewed and downsized if they were excessive, also based on an analysis of the cumulative impact of all of those appropriations. And also that the DNR and the municipalities needed to be preparing plans for irrigation bans and some kind of long-term plan for conversion to surface water. So one comment I'd offer here is that there's a lot more litigation that has come in appeals, and not all of Judge Mirren's decision has been upheld. But the impact of that decision in terms of a Northeast Metro groundwater task force, the intensive amount of planning on water conservation measures that our municipalities have undertaken, all are reflective of kind of how serious this issue has been taken. So the DNR brought appeals to the Minnesota Court of Appeals. They raised 9 different grounds of appeals, and the Court of Appeals decided 2 of them. And these are really about the legal theories under which the DNR can be sued. One involves the Minnesota Environmental Rights Act, which provides that any person can sue and get declaratory or equitable relief, not money damages, but an order of a court against any person for pollution, impairment, or destruction of natural resources. And that pollution, impairment, or destruction is defined as violating an environmental standard or taking an action that has a material adverse impact on the resource. And the Court of Appeals decided that the associations couldn't proceed and have a legal claim against the DNR based on that, because there was also a provision that said that if your conduct that's alleged to be violating or impacting a water resource is undertaken pursuant to a permit, that's a defense. So you'll see that issue comes up again with the Minnesota Supreme Court. But what the Court of Appeals said was that the associations could proceed under the Environmental Rights Act if for a broad challenge to the standards or rules, basically saying that the rules governing groundwater appropriations were inadequate. If that's a legitimate claim, they could make and proceed. Then another very interesting doctrine that the district court had used as a basis for its decision was also a big issue on appeal, and that is what we call the public trust doctrine. And that goes back more than 100 years in United States Supreme Court decisions that established this basic idea that states are holding jurisdiction over navigable waters in trust for the public, and that they states can take action to protect those waters against private actions that interrupt or impair or encroach on the public's interest. So we always think of the public waters, surface waters, and beds underneath them as being owned or under this trust of the state of Minnesota in trust for the public interest. The associations had been bringing a legal claim that these groundwater appropriations were thereby violating this public trust and adversely impacting White Bear Lake. What the Court of Appeals said is, no, that doesn't apply to groundwater. And so it would not recognize that public trust doctrine. When it went to the Minnesota Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court said, we'd like to review these 2 issues before this litigation goes any further, they said, no, you can pursue an environmental rights action under that challenge to the conduct, because the DNR conduct that was the problem here wasn't merely issuing permits that were actions in compliance with the standards, but in fact, the way they administered the program was mismanaging and not in compliance with the permits and the rules. And so the Supreme Court would allow the DNR to be sued under that environmental rights cause of action. Secondly, the Supreme Court said that they would not go along with the public trust doctrine either, because they traced the focus to be really on navigable waters, not groundwater. And so that public trust doctrine is gone as a legal theory in Minnesota for this kind of case. There'll be a lot of discussion about that because, as you I think are all mindful, it's quite a connection between the groundwater and the lake that was at issue there. And they weren't necessarily alleging that there was harm to groundwater. They were alleging that by appropriating so much groundwater, there was harm to the surface water of White Bear Lake, the lake, and that which is a navigable water. So there'll be a lot more debate about that, but the Minnesota Supreme Court has settled that issue and said, now go back to the Court of Appeals on all the other issues that the DNR had raised, the other 7 issues. So we'll be seeing litigation about White Bear Lake still for some time. But these 2 important legal theories have been decided. One is that there is an Environmental Rights Act cause of action over the way the DNR's conducted itself in issuing the groundwater appropriation permits, and there is not a public trust doctrine cause of action. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions about the White Bear Lake case.
Anybody have any questions?
Madam President.
Go ahead.
Louis, is your newsletter that encapsulates all of this information available in printed form? And if so, I'd like to have one.
Yes, through the U.S. Postal Service.
Yes, my favorite.
Thank you.
Favorite communication service, the U.S. Postal Service.
Very good. I'll make sure that gets in the mail to you.
So,
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Smith, my recollection from reading I did read your newsletter and it was very well written. Thank you. I thought the Supreme Court did find something on the actual merits. Am I mistaken there?
No, it's just these 2 legal issues.
So Louis, does that mean the other 7 areas are yet to be litigated or finished, or they're no longer in limbo right now, or what?
It's back to the Court of Appeals to take up those 7 other issues that the DNR had appealed from the district court on. So there'll be more litigation. The one thing I would underscore in light of your earlier discussion about this groundwater task force is I think that's where the real action is. The work of planning and how to manage drinking water systems and take care with groundwater appropriation has been busy and will get busier, I'm sure. And the court will keep dealing with these issues. But I think at the level you folks are engaged with this, with your municipal partners and in discussions with the DNR, that's the real work to take place.
Madam President?
Yes.
Louis, one of the things that I remember Brian Bear giving a presentation about Hugo's actions that they have taken in response to this accusation that they were drawing out so much water. Municipalities were drawing so much groundwater, White Bear Lake was going down, and showing you the savings that they did through the irrigation reuse programs, the money that they've spent on and changing their building codes so that so much water isn't used in the houses or in the sprinklers or such, and that they got to the point where they thought they couldn't pay for their water system because they decreased so much coming out of the groundwater. And I think that's a really important point, that the difference in management of the groundwater by the individual municipalities has had, or some of them at least, and I use Hugo as an example because I'm so familiar with that one. It had a tremendous impact. And so I agree with you, the action is where that committee is, because as I remember when we all went to those meetings, one of the first things they were going to do was shut down all the wells, and it's not necessary because other management techniques of using the surface water in the stormwater ponds has made the difference to prevent the sharing and shutting down of the wells.
I'd like to ask Marcy, since you're the newest member, do you have any questions for Louis? Because there was a lot of history, so that you go in with a good understanding.
Well, that is one of the issues about being appointed to this task force. However, I am very much aware of the groundwater, surface water challenges that have occurred throughout the state. And I also recall Manager Hockey doing a very extensive presentation to the Citizens Advisory Committee about 18 months ago. So with staff help, I think I can, ramp up to this, but it did make me concerned about how people were appointed to that task force and who was representing what. So needless to say, I'm going to have to get a feel for the committee's membership, where they're all at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Louis. Anybody else have any questions for Louis?
President Preiner?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's important to point out the distinction that's on the slide right now regarding the public trust doctrine is not applicable to groundwater, but rather is on the navigable surface waters. I bring that up, pointed out.
Now joining.
I point that out because the DNR has made reference to that public trust doctrine when we've discussed with them our public drainage system and our ease of accomplishing our repair project. So just to point that out, it appears it's still applicable to the navigable waters of surface waters. Thank you. I believe Louis was going to continue then with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer waters of the U.S.
Yes.
I'll be very good. I'll be brief about this also, but there has been a national debate in the courts and in our administrations for a number of years about what the limits of the jurisdiction, the federal jurisdiction, is over the waters of the United States. And it's essentially, everyone agrees that what we would consider the typical navigable waters that you can navigate on are a part of that jurisdiction. But then it's a question of the adjacent waters, whether they be smaller streams, intermittent streams or flows, wetlands that are ephemeral, that kind of come and go with stormwater. The big debate has been whether the extent of the federal jurisdiction over those kind of secondary connected water bodies. The United States Supreme Court about 10 years ago had an important decision called the Rapanos decision. And there were really two ways of thinking about that. The majority under Justice Kennedy said, so long as you can show in the record a significant connection or nexus to a navigable water, then that extended water is also part of the federal jurisdiction. I would say from a watershed science standpoint, we all get that. We understand in our watershed how connected all the water bodies are to each other as a system. But when you get into the question of whether the federal government needs to have jurisdiction to regulate those water bodies, that's when you get into a lot more debate. Justice Scalia had a narrower definition of the extent of waters in the United States. He focused on those that had a relatively permanent, standing, or continuous flow, or a direct surface connection, not an indirect connection. So that was kind of the minority view by the Supreme Court back then. In 2015, under the Obama administration, there was a rule issued that followed Justice Kennedy's definition generally. when President Trump took office, the Trump administration repealed that rule, ultimately formally repealed it this past December, and issued a new rule that they call the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, which was legally effective this June. What it does is expressly include typical waters that we would all think of as jurisdictional navigable waters, the territorial seas, tributaries that can have contact surface flows, and wetlands that are directly adjacent to those jurisdictional waters. But it excludes the groundwater, ephemeral features, artificial lakes, ponds, irrigated areas, water-filled depressions, the incidental ones. And it's much more complicated than that, but broadly, that's the direction, is to tailor back a more narrow definition of the limits of federal jurisdiction. The net impact is that the Army Corps of Engineers should be regulating less activity as it relates to impact to those marginal wetlands. So that's where we stand in terms of the federal administration, the rule that's issued by the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. Interestingly, there's already litigation about that. And some courts have said, no, that violates the Supreme Court's framework. Other courts have said, no, that's okay. We got to give deference to the federal agencies. So the lawyers are going to be busy about this for a long time. But the Supreme Court of the United States also this year issued a very, very important decision about the Clean Water Act and the extent of the federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. And to be brief today, what I'll just say is in Hawaii, the county of Maui had a wastewater treatment system, where they inject wastewater into the ground in wells that are meant generally to contain that wastewater and let it slowly dissipate. But they have been leaching, and a number of dye tests were done and traced the pollutants from those wells to travel clearly through the groundwater into the Pacific Ocean, causing significant pollution. And there's been litigation over that system for a number of years. The Clean Water Act says that if you're going to discharge a pollutant into navigable water from a point source, you need a permit. And the county of Maui, with their system, said, no, that's not a...
Mary Vining is now exiting.
Said, no, that's not a direct discharge. It's indirect, and so it doesn't require a permit. And the other courts of appeals around the United States, including the Ninth Circuit, where Hawaii is covered, said all that really matters is if you can fairly trace the connection. We're not going to get into a distinction about direct versus indirect. If you can trace that connection, we're going to say that you need a permit and there is federal jurisdiction. The Supreme Court came up with their own new test, but I would say came up with what many would call a fairly moderate to liberal position, which is interesting for this court because the narrower view had been articulated by Justice Scalia and the more conservative justices, but Justice Roberts and a majority of a total of 6 justices on this court came up with this test of functional equivalency. So they say you have jurisdiction federally and need a permit for a direct discharge or something that is functionally equivalent to a direct discharge. And they outlined these different factors to be considered. The 2 most important are the transit time, the amount of time that the pollutant takes to flow through in this case, the groundwater out to the navigable water, the ocean, and the amount of distance that's traveled. And so the Supreme Court remanded back to the lower courts to apply this test and consider in the Maui case whether or not those pollutants are flowing through in the functional equivalent of a connection or direct discharge to a navigable water. So the point here is that many would say that this is one of the most important water law decisions the United States Supreme Court has issued in quite some time, and it sustains a fair amount of federal jurisdiction over these types of actions, and really suggests some conflict between that and the Trump administration's new navigable waters protection rule. So bottom line here is a lot of ongoing litigation and discussion at this federal level. I would say in our watershed, the place this matters most is if we undertake projects that impact wetlands, and it raises the question of whether or not we need a Corps permit. Arguably, under the new rule, it'll be less likely, should be less likely in marginal cases that we would need a Corps permit. But we'll have to see how the litigation about that rule proceeds. So I'll stop there, see if you have any questions. Thanks for your indulgence.
Yes, thank you, Louis. Very educational. Questions from the board or staff?
So this is Marcy again. This is more a procedural question. Nick, if it was all possible, could you have given us a heads up that we would have a presentation like this towards the end of the month? Just to kind of wrap our heads around the timing of the meeting on this one. And then also any further, like a copy of the PowerPoint, or I do not get your newsletter, Louis. So any of that.
Yes, I'll take care of both of those things.
Okay.
So just
Okay, thank you.
don't want a long discussion, but so like Hanson Park, we had to get Corps approval on Hanson Park. And it may be that Hanson Park would have been considered not a waterway because it was a man-made kind of like, you know, storms.
Impoundment.
Yeah. It's interesting. Okay. Of course, the hardest thing I ever get any agency to say is, I don't have jurisdiction.
Yes.
Well, I thought it was good that we could get brought up to date on these issues because they're out there. As far as timing, Marcy, when they would be on the agenda would be when we thought that it was available and we could get it in at the same time. So
Yes. President Preiner, to that.
I'm go ahead. Yeah.
President Preiner, to that, I routinely.
Okay.
Sorry, President Preiner, Manager Wynant, my apologies. I just learned of the PowerPoint possibility yesterday as Louis and I prepped for today's meeting, and I thought it would be a good addition. Certainly when those, as I appreciate that, Louis will share those with the board. Further, Louis, if you need any of the manager's emails or so on, you know, we're happy to share that so they all receive the document. That's all.
Okay, anything else in the update for administrator?
President Preiner, no, I have nothing further on that. I'll note, obviously, these play into our future projects and certainly both your consultants, legal and engineering, we have these types of conversations about the applicability or what we think is the best path forward and recommend accordingly to the board for your deliberation. So we'll see what comes our way as we proceed through our projects.
Thank you, Nick. Manager's update. Manager Waller.
Thank you, Madam President. I attended the Washington County Consortium meeting and listened to the discussion. Mostly the discussion was about the presentation of communication outreach techniques and management they were sharing with each other because, of course, this COVID-19 has changed things around, and many of these folks had different techniques or that they used in order to talk to the public and to themselves, and so it was just kind of they shared it, and it was interesting to listen to what they're, you know, what one use versus another use, etc.
Okay. Anything else, John?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Manager Winan.
As I told you on Monday, I was election judge all day yesterday, and I would just like to report that I was very impressed with the Secretary of State's office preparation for voting in light of COVID. I was completely comfortable as an election judge, and I think anybody who showed up at the polls would have also, and were comfortable with the actions that were taken to keep people safe.
Manager Bradley,
I have nothing.
Manager Wageman.
I just have one comment. In lieu of what Administrator Tomzak said during his update on taking another look at the issue we talked about at the board workshop, just on behalf of the people of that system, I would just like to say thank you to the staff and the board for being willing and flexible enough to take another look at it. And I appreciate it. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
wanted to say thanks.
Okay, and I have nothing new to report. I think we've got a great meeting. Thank everybody. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion man seconded. Any further discussion? And it'll have to be a roll call. Waller.
Yes.
Winant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Yes.
Manager Wageman.
Yes.
And Manager Preiner. Yes. All right. Thank you.
See you all.
See everybody later. Good
Bye.
meeting.
Bye.
Yep.
Goodbye.